There we go. Yeah, so next class, we're going to meet in room 105 just for Friday's test. We'll do the test up there. All right, so I've got your homework returned to you, and I'm all caught up with that. So what we've got left to do is, as you know, we've got left to review for the test. And before we get to reviewing, or before I get to showing some of the answers to the review on the screen, excuse me, I wanted to go through this one more time. We now have 6 reasons possible reasons for accidental in music. And you should probably know the first 4 or so by now because we've been really hitting those every time we've been discussing this. Yep. So the first reason, which we learned in theory 1, is we need to sometimes add an accidental to La and T, or the raised 6 and 7 scale degrees in minor keys. And we still do that in aural skills. Those of you that are still taking aural skills with me, when we deal with melodic occasions in minor keys, we're still doing that. Still doing this. Okay. Then last semester, I believe it was, we learned about secondary chords. These are the 5 of something and the 7 diminished 7 of something. 90+% of those are chromatic chords, which means they will require at least one accidental to be spelled correctly because they don't fit in the key exactly that they're being used in. Also last semester we talked about modulation and how when you modulate to a different key, usually there is a signal pitch, some kind of signal accidental to alert you to the fact that you're changing keys. So that would be another reason for accidentals in music. Then earlier this unit, and this is also going to be on the test, modal mixture, also known as the borrowed chords. These are chromatic chords and will require at least one accidental to be spelled correctly in the key that they're used in. Then, not so long ago, we learned about the Neapolitan 6 chord. That's a chromatic chord as well. And then finally, we just finished talking about our augmented 6 chords. And these are chromatic chords as well. So, at the end of last semester, I think we only knew a couple types of chromatic chords. That was the 5 or something and the 7 of something. And that was it. But now, after this unit, not only do we know these chromatic chords, we also know borrowed chords, and Neapolitan, and augmented 6 chords. So I want you to I guess take stock and realize how far you've come because now you know a lot more chromatic chords than you did before this semester began. So we started on the spring semester. So those would be the 6 reasons for accidentals in music to date for us. Okay? And I just hope that helps keep your thinking a little bit organized. These chords are different than this chord, and this chord is different than this chord. And Neapolitans are not borrowed chords, and they're not augmented 6 chords. They all have their little place, their little identity, and their little function when it comes to music. All right, so with that said, let's go to the handout that you have, the review worksheet. And we'll start with section 1, which is spelling the chords. Let's take just a handful of these on all at once. I believe on your worksheet it says, can you spell these chords approximately 30 seconds per chord? Every chord on this review worksheet requires accidentals. Did I say first? Okay. So the first three. Why is the first one in D major there? Why is that on this review? Is that something that we would have spelled back in theory one? Not exactly.
It's a little bit because it's fully diminished.
That's right. Because it's fully diminished 7/7, it technically comes from D minor. Right? In D major, the 7th chord would be 7 half diminished 7. So technically it comes from D minor, and therefore we need an accidental to make it appropriate. C sharp, E, G, B flat. Number 2, augmented, or the second one there, augmented 6th. Remember, lay is the bass note, so in D minor, lay is the pitch B flat. And that's in the key signature. Then I need do, which is D in this key. I need me, which is F. And fi, which is G sharp. G sharp. And of course, lay underneath fi always produces the classic or characteristic augmented 6 interval that all these augmented 6 chords share or have. The next one is another borrowed chord, modally mixed chord. It comes from E flat minor. That's why we need a C flat in the chord. It's F, A flat, C flat, E flat in the first inversion. See the next 3. A major, we have a French 6. Lay, do, re, fi. Since I'm in a major key, I need to put an accidental on my bass note to make it lay, because otherwise it would be la. So I need to lower the 6th scale degree to F natural to make it lay. And then I have A and B, and then of course E in this key is D sharp. So F natural, A, B, D sharp. The next one is just a Neapolitan 6 in G minor. Remember, the root of all Neapolitans is the lowered 2nd scale degree. That's why the root of my chord is A flat. A flat. And then I just spell a major triad on that note. Whatever accidentals you need to make a major triad on the lower 2nd scale degree. And put it in first inversion in this case. It's asking for first inversion Neapolitan. The last one on this line is just a secondary dominant. Hopefully you could have spelled this correctly last semester. The root of a 4 chord in F minor is B flat. So the dominant of B flat would be F. That's a perfect 5th above. So F is the root of the chord I'm trying to spell. And then I just need to spell a dominant 7th on F, using any accidentals as needed in this key to make it a major minor 7. F, A natural, C, E flat is the A natural on the bottom. Questions, comments about how to spell any of these? Yeah, there's not going to be this many to spell on the test, but there could be 3 or 4 chords to spell beginning outside of the test. The next line for me is on a different page. Let's look at those. There we go. F major, a flat 6. What does the accidental in front of the Roman numeral tell you to do? Lower the root of the chord a half step outside beyond the key signature. So rather than having D be the root of this chord, because D fits into the key signature, I'm going to have D flat, the lowered 6th scale degree. And it's a major or capital Roman numeral, so I want a D flat major triad. So D flat, F, A flat would be the right notes to make it major. Another Neapolitan 6 coming in the key of E major. Just know that the root is F natural. And to make it a major triad, I need F natural, A, and C natural. Two accidentals to spell this chord correctly. The next one is a 7, fully diminished 7 of 5. Again, a chord hopefully we could have spelled properly last semester. The root of a 5 chord in B flat is F. What is F leading to? Go down a minor second. You should get E natural. So that is the root. And by the way, this is all in bass clef. So I have E natural, G, B flat, and B flat. The next one I'm asking you to spell is a German diminished third, F minor. What I do for those is I spell a German augmented sixth standard first, and then I take phi and I move it to the very bottom. So probably the way I did this before I put the final answer on the staff is I probably had the D flat, the F, the A flat, and the B natural up here for a German augmented sixth, and then I just moved the B natural down here. And it is a diminished third chord because B natural up to D flat, that first interval of the third down there, that is a diminished third. B natural to D flat. The next one, lower the 7th scale degree in A major a half step, so not G sharp, but G natural is going to be the root of my chord. So I need a natural on the G and then just spell a major triad on G natural, GBD. Right, the flat in front of the Roman numeral does not necessarily mean you always flat the root. It just means you lower the root from that key, whatever it is, a half step. And then last but not least, we have our Italian sixth. Only 3 pitches necessary, lay, do, and fi. And in the key of E minor, that would be C, E, and A sharp. C, E, and A sharp. Questions? I'm pretty sure, I'm confident that everyone in here knows how to spell these chords. It's just when it comes to test time, will you remember to pay attention to the details and try to remember all your accidentals and think about the root right and calculate your intervals right and all this kind of stuff. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. But I think you know how to spell things. Okay, what next do you have? You have modulation with modal mixture. You had to write out a pivot chord chart for modulation from G major to C minor. And you're supposed to use modal mixture in your pivot chord chart. So how many rows or tiers? 3 rows with your pivot chord chart, right? The first row is going to be the chords diatonic to G major. The bottom row will be the chords diatonic to C minor. What's the middle row going to be? The chords diatonic to G minor. The parallel minor to the original key. So I have all those diatonic Roman numerals written out representing the chords G major, G minor, and C minor. I think that I have any possible pivot chords between G major and C minor. I don't think I did. That's why I had to put in my middle row. Chords diatonic to G minor. If I borrow a chord from G minor, that's going to temporarily put me in that key for just a chord, and it's going to put me super closely related to the key I'm trying to modulate to, so that will guarantee me at least finding one pivot chord between G minor and C minor. Leave the first column alone, don't cross it out, don't circle it. Cross out the second column, leave the third column alone. I would probably circle this pivot chord here. The 4 in G minor becomes a 1 in C minor. Cross out the next column, leave the next column alone, and cross out the last column. Remember, don't cross out any possible or potential pivot chords. Only cross out the impossible ones and circle one of the possible ones as your best or smoothest choice. Now, I have this as off screen, but did you include flat in front of 3, 6, and 7 in your pivot chord chart? You need a flat in front of the 3 for G minor, the flat in front of the 6, and the flat in front of the 7. Because if you use those chords as part of a pivot, they would be borrowed chords in G major. And the proper Roman numeral symbol for those would be flat 3, flat 6, or flat 7. Okay, questions? Comments, concerns? Okay, the progression that I use, I'm going to end up writing on the board over here rather than. I could give you a really long progression, but I think I'll abbreviate it and make it a shorter one. Okay, it says something to the effect of use the pivot chord that you just found, your circle pivot from the chart above, and then write Roman numerals for progressive modulation from G major to C minor. About how many chords minimum should you have in each key? Yeah, probably 4. And what should you always start with? 1. And what should you always end with in the new key? 1. Yeah, don't end with some kind of deceptive cadence or something weird like that, okay? So, we're going to start with 1. Then I have 5, 4, 3. Then I have 1, 6. And those of you that are in aural skills 4 with me right now know the bass goes do, re, mi. And then, oh, by the way, I use my borrowed chord. I use my minor 4. So how many chords do I have in the original key? 4. So that's the minimum. And the bass happens to go do, re, mi, fa. Okay, we're going to C minor. The 4 chord, which is borrowed from G minor, that's a C minor chord, actually is a 1 in the new key. And what if on the test, I might in the instructions, if I ask you to write out a progression here to modulate, I might ask you to use at least one chord that we learned from this unit, a chromatic chord. Like a borrowed chord, or a Neapolitan, or an augmented 6 chord in the progression from it. I ended up using Neapolitan. And then I used, what was one of those chords that can come between the Neapolitan and 5? Remember? Okay. Yep. So you could just do your progression like that. You could also use minor 164 instead of this chord, because you used a chromatic chord from this unit already. Or you could use both. And if I use both, the 164 chord would come after this one. Let's say you wanted to use an augmented 6 chord in this progression somewhere. What chord would you put right before it? 4, 6. And what chord would you put after it? Let's say it's a French 6. What chord would the French 6 go to? 5? 4, 1, 6, 4, 5. If you use a German 6, though, it better go to 1, 6, 4 first. All these little nuances, right? Little details. Okay, let me pause here for a moment again. Questions about anything in, I guess this is section Roman numeral 2 of your review. You know how to write out a pivot chord chart using little mixtures. You know how to find your best pivot chord. You know how to use it in the middle of a progression and write a progression for modulation. Okay, so far you guys are doing real well. Let's see, what's the next one on your sheet? Mine's all different than yours, so I'm using it. Here we go. Can we skip section 3 temporarily? We'll come back to the analysis section. I want to go to section 4, the part writing. And I'll go back and show the answers to my part writing I have up on the screen here. The first example you have is an F minor example, short example, that includes an Italian 6. I like to put a lot of reminders and notes to you all, even if they're, like obvious or duh kind of thing. It doesn't hurt to remind you about these things. First of all, when we part write an Italian 6 and we need 4 notes, which note do we double? That's right, we double do in the Italian 6. So my Italian 6 is D flat on the bottom. I need F and then B natural. F needs to be doubled. Put one F in the tenor and I put another F in the, alto. So double do in the Italian 6. Don't forget your accidental on Phi, wherever Phi is, whether it's in the tenor, alto, or soprano voice. How do you resolve an augmented 6 chord? Well, the augmented 6 interval should expand outward by contrary motion to create an octave on the dominant pitch, sol. So my Phi goes up by half step to sol, and my lay goes down by half step to sol. Those are the pitches. That's the pitch I want doubled in my potential 6/4. Right? It says double the bass note in all 6/4 chords. And then when I resolve the part rate to 1, 6, 4, 5, just remember you're in a minor key, so you need to raise T with an accidental. Listen to this one. F minor. Okay, so the Italian 6 goes to potential 6/4. Goes to 5. See, the next one you have is in D minor. Notice how underneath the next example it says chords 2 through 4 should be chromatically smooth in both outer voices. That is a big hint. What's the second chord you're going to use with raw? It's got raw in the soprano. Okay, and 6, good. And then if both of the outer voices should be chromatic, what's the chord that comes after the N6? Good. It's got to be that one, 7, 7, 5. Because if you use 1, 6, 4 after the N6, you wouldn't get chromatic smoothing in the bass voice. There we go. You see how I have on the soprano voice raw, by the way, when you part right in the Neapolitan 6, raw has to be in the highest voice. In the chromatic smoothing, it'll go down to do, then down to T. All that happens in the soprano voice. If you're not doing that in the soprano voice, it's going to be marked out. I also need a chromatic motion in the bass voice according to the instructions. So I have in the bass fa, phi, and sol. I got that marked there. What do you double in a Neapolitan 6? The bass. Good. You're going to remember that. And then when you use a 7 diminished 7 of 5 to get the chromatic smoothing in the bass and the soprano, don't forget you're going to need some accidentals to spell that 7 diminished 7 of 5 properly. Don't forget your accidentals there. And then, let's see, don't forget to raise T, to raise T with an accidental. Yeah. Just want to draw this to your attention here. Let's say I forgot my accidental on the B. Let's say I forgot to put a natural on, and I left it as B flat from the key signature. What interval, if I forgot the natural, what interval does B flat make with the alto's F? Perfect fifth, right? What interval does the tenor's A in this chord make with the alto's E? Perfect fifth. If I forgot this natural here, you see how I would end up writing parallel. Parallel. It's like a minefield, isn't it? Let me go to the piano quick and play this one. D minor is the key. And the progression sounds like this. I think of Schubert's Girl King when I do that. Any questions about this one? Let's see, what do you have next? You have one with E flat major. With a French 6. So, the French 6, lay, do, re, fi. Lay, of course, has to be in the bottom. And that in this key is C flat. I voiced the remaining notes like this. I put Fi in the tenor, I put Do in the alto, and Re in the soprano, although you could rearrange those as long as you have good spacing. Fi always requires an accidental in augmented 6 chords. Now, normally, if I was taking this French 6 to a root position 5, I would have lay go down to sol, and Fi would go up a half step to sol. But you see how I'm going to a 5-7? Didn't we talk about this one of the last classes? In this case, Fi has to slide down a half step to create the 7, or produce, I should say, the 7 from the 5-7 chord. And then after that is all in 5-7 and 1 is standard. Although, as I returned to the homework at the beginning of the class, there were several students in here that didn't take their 7th down by step and the cadence again. So that's why I have this little arrow here. Fa, down. Yes. Listen to this one. E flat is the key. Okay, my French 6, very crunchy, the crunchiest of all augmented 6 chords, I think. 5-7 is very nice. So you go from pretty much strong dissonance the last one you should have is in B minor. The chord I gave you there is a German 6, which means it must go to a 6/4 chord before it goes to 5. Otherwise, if you take German 6 to 5 immediately or directly, you'll get parallel perfect fifths that you can't fix. Okay, so there again, lay and Fi form the augmented 6 interval. Make sure you resolve them outward and contrary motion by half step to the octave on the dominant pitch of the key, and you should be able to be, everything should be good from there. Don't forget again to raise T in minor keys.
Just going with our chord.
I'm really trying to, I'm trying to remind my Theory 2 students about this, because they really have to remember this right now. Leading from minus 2.
We think we need from other ones that's more than 5/7.
Yes. Okay, let me think here. How would that this differ?
I had the alternate back.
Yeah. That should be fine. Good. The last one to play here. The augmented 6 goes to 164. Or, if you did what Haley did, your 164 to 5 would sound like this. Or something like, no, I'm sorry. There it is. 5/7. The progression that you have on the bottom, we've done several examples like this in class. I gave you an in-class handout several classes ago, and then we even had a quiz that had a little bit of this on there where you had to add accidentals to the borrowed chords and so forth so that they're spelled properly. So I hope when you look at the Roman numerals, you see we're in major. The 4 chord is minor, so that's borrowed from D minor. The 164 is also minor, so that's borrowed. So these 2 chords are going to require at least one accidental. In fact, they exactly contain each one accidental. Then I'm having a deceptive resolution here, 5/7 to flat 6. So the root of my chord needs to be B flat, and the one that is so easy to forget is the natural on the F. It's got to be a major triad, right? If you don't have the natural on the F, you have B flat, D, F sharp from the key signature, and that's an augmented 6 chord, which is like the wackiest thing you ever want to come across. Also, here's the reminder. Double the third of a 6 chord, and that includes a flat 6 chord. And this comes after the 5. So that's why I have 2 D's in this chord, and not 2 B flats, not 2 D's. So the question is, did you get all the accidentals you needed in this passage, and did you remember to double the third in your 6 chord? Even though we're in major here, it probably most of the progression will sound as if it's in minor. In fact, the first chord is the only one that really makes it sound like it's in major. And then from here on, it's all borrowed. All right, questions? We have, go back to section 3. Is that the last section we have? All right, the first analysis in section 3, the Mozart example. I think I had X'd out one of the chords so you didn't have to analyze that. But otherwise, I do ask you to analyze it in the key of C minor despite the 4 flats. So this must be a passage that and Mozart's that were already modulated to a different key rather than staying in the home key of F minor. Which will still be great. Several strange chords in this passage. Notice the P6/4 right before the German harmonic sixth. You see how the C in the tenor is still holding across the whole measure? So that's C, E flat, G, with G in the bass, it's a second triad. Then we have a German sixth, A flat, which is lay the key, C, do is in the tenor, E flat, which is May, is in the alto, and then F sharp is in the soprano. Then I asked you to skip the next chord. You see I have a 4-6-5. Don't worry, that's so bizarre. If there's something like that on the test, you won't have to analyze that chord. All right, so then you have some other standard chords. Notice this progression at the end. Neapolitan 6, 1-6-4, 5-7-1. We've looked at that progression many times. You see how Mozart, you should give an A+, because he has Ra in the highest voice, goes down to Do, goes down to T, all in the same highest voice. Chromatic smoothing in the soprano. Double the bass in the Neapolitan, Mozart's got it, check. Double the bass in the Potential 6/4, Mozart's got it, check. Is there anything else I can call? So, besides this is not a good example. We know that after a German 6 should go to 1-6-4. What's another type of 6/4 it could go to? P6. It could go to a P6. C minor. So this is a modulation to D flat major. How did you know that there's a modulation at all? What was your clue? It should say starts in such and such a key. Right? That means it probably doesn't end in that scene. Now, the pivot chord in this example is one with a borrowed chord in the first key. That borrowed chord is a flat 6. This chord is borrowed from B flat minor. The flat 6 in B flat minor functions as a standard normal 4 in B flat major. So that's how I would analyze this. In fact, it turns out the first chord that contains some accidentals in this passage turns out to be the pivot chord, the borrowed or the modally mixed pivot chord. And then after the modulation, we have some standard chords. I'm not going to attempt to play these four voices all together at the piano, but if it will let me connect to the wireless display, I will try to play this little passage for you on YouTube It's not even like 10 seconds long, it goes really quickly. But, and it's hard to orient your ears kind of in the key that you need as well. I'm going to try it anyways, let's see. Okay, so watch the music in your review. Let's see if I get any sound. Not fast. It's like all of a sudden, okay, then, whoa, now there's a modulation. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's hear it one more time. Maybe I'll give you a little bit more, a few seconds before the passage. Boy, that guy's pretty serious. He's intense. Is that how you guys get intense too when you sing in choir? I'm sure you do. Did I cover everything? We're at the time. Well, you guys didn't have too many questions. Are you sure you don't have any questions on it? Yeah.
Can we go into like what goes on before and after the like drilling?
Sure. There are several chords that can come before an augmented sixth chord. They generally have la or lays or lays. But just to weed out a bunch of confusion, the only one I want you to remember is before an augmented sixth chord. Could you use in major keys? Could you use the 4/6? And in minor keys, could you use the minor 4/6? And then you have your augmented sixth chord next, whatever it is, Italian, French, or German. And then you would most likely have a 6/4 to 5. Okay. This is a really good progression right here. In fact, if you use the German 6, you would have to go to 1/6/4/5. If you use the French or the Italian 6, you could bypass it today. But this kind of shows you what can come before the augmented 6 and what typically comes right after the augmented, all augmented 6. I don't know, depending on piano when you came in, I mentioned at the top of the class that our test on Friday is actually going to be a good 105. Did you hear what I said?
No.
Okay. But yeah, because there's going to be some scholarship auditions in this room, some vocal auditions, so we won't be able to use it, so we're being kicked out temporarily to room 105, and that's where the test will be on Friday, just for Friday. Okay, anything else? All right, let's go ahead and break that. We'll see you. You have no homework, obviously, except the study. We'll see you on Friday upstairs for the test.
So you know she's good.
That's what I she said it would work. I don't know if she's doing that.
So we completely also needed to like go in and they had to cook it out like also I'll give you a quick. Oh wait, or do I want to try the extra credit?
Sometimes